Before I begin, I should say that there are a few seats at the front. So anyone standing at the back, please do feel free to make your way to the front and have a ringside view. My name is Will Tanner. I am the director of Onward, a think tank dedicated to levelling up opportunity and strengthening social fabric in all parts of the United Kingdom, especially in those places where it's been lost in recent decades. And I am completely delighted to be holding this event today and to welcome you all to this discussion about homes for Ukraine, making the most of British families' generosity and the lessons for future crises. The backdrop to this discussion needs very little introduction. Since Russian forces invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February of this year, around 13 million Ukrainian people have been displaced, many of them women and children. That is the equivalent of the populations of London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Leeds, and Bradford combined, to put it in some perspective. But in response to this tragedy, in this country and in many other countries, we have seen hundreds of thousands of families open their homes to bring Ukrainian people to places of safety and sanctuary. The UK has, I think, issued more than 100,000 visas to people fleeing the conflict. More than 200,000 households, I believe, the minister may correct me, have registered to take them in. And the scheme itself is something of a departure from previous approaches to refugee resettlement, or indeed other types of refugee policy. It is not a formal resettlement pathway under UNHCR, for one, but for another, it is focused on giving people the stability and support of a family, rather than, as we've seen in recent responses, the isolation or indeed the public cost of a hotel. It has not all been plain sailing, and I'm sure we will get into some of the issues and the resolutions to those issues today. The government has been very clear. It's acknowledged that the response has perhaps not been as quick as it might have wanted, and that setting up a scheme from scratch has been difficult. But I think it's also true that tens of thousands of Ukrainian refugees have already come to the United Kingdom, and every day people fleeing that conflict are being given sanctuary here. So today I hope we can reflect on the past 3 months, what we've learned, some of the lessons that we can take, but also look to the future. What lessons can we learn for future crises, future conflicts, much as we might regret that they are inevitable? What next for the scheme now that Ukrainians have begun arriving? What do we need to do to ensure that beyond the initial period of sanctuary that some families are giving, that they are given the support that they need to settle into lives here in the UK for as long as the conflict exists? And does the scheme genuinely mark the start of a long-term shift away from recent refugee resettlement policy, or is this a one-off? Is this particular to the circumstances that we are seeing in Ukraine? To get into that discussion, I am delighted to welcome a really fantastic panel of speakers today, including His Excellency Vadim Prystaiko, Ukrainian Ambassador to the United Kingdom. You were appointed Ambassador to of Ukraine to the United Kingdom in July 2020. In addition, Vadim serves as Vice Prime Minister of European and Euro-Atlantic integration for Ukraine, and has held this role since June 2020. And he was previously Ukraine's Ambassador to Canada, the head of mission to NATO, and Minister for Foreign Affairs. Our second speaker is Lord Harrington, who before this role was a trustee of Onward, but was appointed specifically as Minister for Refugees on the 8th of March this year, having previously been a Minister in the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Work and Pensions, and indeed Minister for Resettlement in the Home Office between 2015 and 2016. He is a former Conservative MP, having been elected in 2010, now sits in the House of Lords. We will then hear from Lesia Vasylenko, who was elected as a Ukrainian Member of Parliament in August 2019. I'm delighted that she's able to zoom in from Ukraine herself. She is the co-chair of the Ukrainian British Parliamentary Friendship Group, Before entering Parliament, she was the founder and chair of Legal 100, an NGO that created a network of pro bono legal assistance to veterans, soldiers, and members of their families during the Russian-Ukrainian War of 2014. And finally, we will hear from Vika Pirahova, who was originally from Kherson. She's living there prior to the invasion. She was working as a project manager for a Ukrainian law firm, having previously spent 5 years as a teacher. And she moved to the UK in March of this year to live with Victoria Prentice MP, one of the number of MPs sponsoring refugees under the scheme. So I'm incredibly grateful to all of you for giving up your time to be here and to give your thoughts. Without further ado, I am delighted, therefore, to hand over to our first speaker, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is, I know that most of you following the news in Ukraine, and you don't need to have any presentation, any brief from us, how it is going on, where it's going, where it's heading, and where all of us will be in the months or months. But I guess that this conversation is very important because in most of the case, we're just overlooking this very important part, what's happening with Ukrainians who actually been forced to flee and forced to find new homes. And my situation here is very delicate. From one hand, I have to, really, from the bottom of my heart, to thank for everybody here, for everything that's been done already for Ukrainians. You don't have it, you don't have to do it, neither government, nor people, but the response is enormous. The humbling and very, very thankful for each and every person, each and every family opened up their homes and hearts as well. But at the same time to the government, which tried to do the best, and we understand how difficult it is, and I will try to just in a couple of words to explain where we as Ukrainians will see the deficiencies, where something can be fixed. But again, it's not just to poke the deficiencies in the systems, just to to start the conversation how we actually do. And I agree with you very much that who knows, this might be a new scheme for how to treat refugees generally from this nation and many other nations around the globe. Just to start, I know it's very difficult still for Ukrainians, for Ukrainian government to place words refugees and Ukrainians together. We still are getting used to this. We know of so many problems, so many troubles which pushed people outside of their homelands. But so far we've been lucky as Ukrainian nation to be allowed to stay in our nation and trying to build whatever we believe is the image we wanted to have. Unfortunately, yeah, the figures are huge. You compare it with many cities here, but I have to tell you that not many European nations will be able to survive if they lose 7 million, 8 million people. There are some nations which are much smaller than that. And although Ukrainians, and we've been discussing it before, that Ukrainians would not like to stay away, they wouldn't be able to survive outside of the nations. They would rather stick to the neighboring nations like Poland, who actually did an enormous job. And this I believe they deserve the specific consideration, specific discussion of how actually Poland can be helped to still be able to help us. And not just Poland, but Slovak Republic, the Hungarians, the Romanians, all of the nations who actually were like first responders, and they responded in a kindness, and actually it stretched their resources to the extent that we actually have to think how we can help those of them. But the official statistics is also showing us interesting trend right now. More than 1 million Ukrainians already got back home. So this is while we're discussing, while we are trying to find the ways how to help these people outside of Ukraine, we see the trend that Ukrainians are frustrated of the ongoing discomfort, ongoing struggle with different systems around the European Union. And actually, because they're missing the beloved ones, they're missing their homes, they're missing their jobs. This is something we will be able, hopefully, to address along this. We have in Ukraine this joke when family sitting around the table somewhere in Europe, and the husband is slamming the table saying, you know what, now we have to get back to Kiev. Now it is time. And the wife saying, okay, whatever you say. By the way, we are from Odessa, we're not from Kiev. So the mayor of Kiev, and this is one of the cities which are overloaded with problems, mayor of Kiev and now is mayor of Kharkiv, second biggest Ukrainian city, 2 million plus. They're actually asking people, please do not come home. It's not safe yet. We've been bombarded. We have shortages of electricity in the supply and food and everything. It's not time yet, but people are returning. So one of the things I'd like to address right now is how we can still be able to hold them here somewhere in Europe, in European Union, in the European continent, sometimes over the pond in Canada, United States. I even had a conversation with Japanese ambassador who was telling me how many Ukrainians are coming to Japan. Seriously, imagine Ukrainians going to Japan. So all of these issues we still have to work, and I believe that we will be able to, to somehow preserve their lives and preserve their way of living, keeping them for some time, but not longer. Here we have to juggle another problem: how Ukrainians are getting back after the war is over, how we can get our people back when they're becoming so comfortable in some other places around the globe. How can we have our people to rebuild our nation again? This is another very difficult question for us. We are 45 million nation right now with a 20+ million diaspora. So you can imagine that this exodus will be probably second biggest wave after the Second World War, when we lost millions and millions of Ukrainians. Yes, it enriched our diaspora. Yes, it enriched our presence around the globe, but we lost so many people who can actually come and do something meaningful. Just to light a couple of things I wanted to bring to the table of discussion. First problem, which is not discussed here, and I have to remind everybody about this. That's biggest problem, I believe, is systemic problem, and systemic problem of visa regime. Why UK was criticized, and especially on the initial stage, when so many people were gathering somewhere in Calais. Because it's not criticism, this is the reality check. I have to remind you that we've been having the visa-free regime with European Union for more than 7 years before war started. So these people could just physically step over the border of Ukraine and be safe. Then they would go around Europe, try to find a place. Many nations opened up immediately their different schemes, and some of them wanted to come here. And in Calais or other places, just been bouncing out of this glass wall of visa regime. Again, it's not somebody's doing it on purpose. This was reality on the ground. And before we manage to address this issue of visas, we will face with different problems. I know this is a difficult issue for the government of the UK. I have to remind you that we canceled visas for UK citizens more than 15 years ago, as to the rest of the European Union. In some years, European Union came with a reciprocal move. So Ukrainians were allowed to travel free without visas to the European Union. It never happened with UK. When UK left the European Union, we had this conversation that we have to address the issue of visa-free regime. But unilaterally, Ukrainian government decided to extend the same regime, the same sort of love, if you wish, to the UK citizens, and hoped that we will be reciprocated in a way. Didn't happen yet. So this is an issue, I have to stress that this is an issue we, I believe, can address. And this is something similar to what other nations are doing right now to help Ukraine when they opening up their trade regimes. We just had with your government, we signed the truly free trade regime, which we will do very soon with European Union, with the whole, and with Canada, United States, just to help Ukrainian economy to survive these very difficult times. My request is, probably should consider the temporary relief of the visas. You're still in total control of the migration flow, but these visas will not allow us to move faster than everybody expect. This is one of the issues, this visa. Let's close this one. Another one is that we, unfortunately, as an embassy, in most cases, we cannot help our own people. We do not have access to the information. I know that all of us, we have to protect the personal information of people coming to each and every state. Same treatment is in Ukraine, but there is circumstances very different now. We are talking about freely about tens of thousands of people, and my consular office, which has to have this all information, we just don't. We can't address, we can inform our people, we can't reach out with the information to any one of our persons. It's just we don't have mechanism. we subscribe to so many different Facebook pages, and just to trying to understand and trying to find the problems. For example, I met with the Secretary of Education, and we have so many different problems. But when we wanted to have a list of troubles of the Ukrainians, and there are so many different, we can't even have mechanisms to reach out to all of them. I would really beg the government to allow us to have access to the database of any sort, emails, anything of Ukrainian on our own citizens, or at least to tell each and every one of them when they are receiving their documents, just notice that please contact your own embassy. We don't know about these people, and this creating our job very put us in very difficult position. And there are minor things which I believe we will be able to brush out. I know that you're working hard, and the home office working hard on how this can be remedied, and in education, separate issues, and there are so many other things. I have a whole list of minor issues. I don't want to bother you with that, but if you come in our discussion to this, I will be more than happy to highlight those ones as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and it's fantastic to be able to have that official view from the Ukrainian embassy to kind of understand how you are seeing these issues. To set out kind of what you think, what the government is already doing, but also perhaps to respond to some of the things that Dean has mentioned.
Thank you, Will. And just so that everybody knows, I think what you've achieved since Onward started in a short time is absolutely fantastic. I'm glad to have played a small part of it. We've known each other for quite some time. Will was at number 10 and was, I would say, a very progressive view in number 10, which was very well received at the time. But as far as I'm concerned, just Will kindly read out my biography. But the reality is, in 2019, I stepped down. And as far as I was concerned, I retired from politics completely, which allowed me to do things like being a trustee of Onward and other charities and some business things as well. And I won't say I forgot about politics, but COVID happened and everybody got on with their lives in different ways. I actually got involved again. There's a reason for telling you this. It's not, but in August, and this is last August, when the Afghan thing happened, Michael Gove and a group of officials called me. I was actually on holiday in Corfu. It's the only time I've done Zoom calls in swimming trunks and a t-shirt. But I told them about the Syrian scheme, which I'd done and gone through it and gave some advice on that. And I basically forgot about it after that. My advice, and this is the relevance for today, was that this needs to be a designated scheme for refugees where all the units of government are under one command and one umbrella. So in the case of, excuse me, in the case of the Syrian refugees, David Cameron made me a minister at DFID, as was the Home Office and DCLG, because it's part of a whole operation of, in the Syrian case, where we actually sourced the refugees. In that case, it was vulnerability, but the transport, logistics, visas, and I'll come on to the ambassador's point on visas in a minute, and then the resettlement in the UK. So that, I thought that worked successfully. Obviously, I'm afraid it was blowing my own trumpet in a way, because it's not the way government normally thinks. But then fast forward to about, it seems like 20 years ago, it was in fact 8 weeks ago, I got a call from Michael Gove, basically asking if I would be prepared to do this job. And I was quite, literally, he just asked me and I said, without doubt, yes. I do not view this as a political job. I'm a government minister and I'm not, believe me, that's not getting out of that. But this is a big project. And I'm a minister in both the Home Office and DLUC, as it's called now, or DCLG, communities, basically. And I believe I had to give up, I've given up everything else, which is why I had to reluctantly resign from Onward. But this is that kind of job. And I became quite obsessed with it. And I think you have to be. And most people who get involved with Ukraine in the current way have done so. And many people in this country have. I just better briefly, before I just hit the ambassador's visa question in just a minute. I'm not trying to duck out of it. He knows that. We've discussed it many times. But for me, this was an opportunity to do what we had done in an embryonic way for Syrians with a resettlement scheme and an embryonic community sponsorship scheme. Now, it was only 600 people in the case of Syria, but here, and one of the conditions that I was appointed on was that this is an uncapped scheme. That was very important to me. And it's, as with everything with government, it's far more complicated than it always seems. And it is. You know, to have an integrated operation across several departments might sound an easy and obvious thing to do, but it's just not the way the machinery of government works. The traditional civil service way is to set up a program board, which is the great and the good, perm sex, etc., from each department. But the reality is this is like a business. Unfortunately, the business is not a product like Amazon, but it is effectively how to actually help move large numbers of people, and it involves so many things, of which the visa part is a small part of it. And now, Ambassador, to show you why I'm a bad politician, I won't duck the question on visas, and I will, in fact, just talk about that for a minute. The visa, I was told by the Prime Minister when I took the job on that why he did not want to do a visa-free scheme. Now, that was his decision. It was, in fact, he told me security, but I thought security, being a naive person, meant spies and stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if the Russians wanted to infiltrate GCHQ, being in someone's spare bedroom in Altrincham is not actually a good way of starting it. I shouldn't joke about it, but that was in my naivety. I thought that's what security was. But in fact, it isn't that. It's a fear of taking the wrong people over here, of people being allowed to smuggle children, of paedophiles, and all this sort of thing. So I said, fine, if we can work that out as quickly as possible. And there's been a lot of pain, pressure on Ukrainian people who've applied to come over here through a complex visa scheme. They were waiting in the ether for far too long. And I said this from the first day, and I take responsibility for it. This is not a politician ducking out of it. I promised to get to a level where we could process between 15 and 20,000 people with 48 hours response time for the application of a visa. And the current situation is this. From this week, so people, this is now an app-based system, and the form is much simpler than it was. I was naive about the form. I thought, oh, 51 pages, how ridiculous it is. We can get that down to 5 pages. And of course, when I went through the pages, I'm saying, why have we got, you know, email address, then the next page address, then that? Well, in my naivety, of course, I was told, because a lot of people fill these out on their phones, and you can't have, you know, you have to keep moving screens. But all this, we boil down to the absolute minimum. The barometric test, which is used for eye test, can be now done on the phone. So in the question of most cases now, they would expect a response which gives them an emailed PDF with permission to travel within the 48 hours. And I'm hoping that will become the norm. There's been a lot of casework done, and I've been driven, I can't say I've been driven mad because that sounds bad, but I've been approached by many people, some of whom are in this room, who've been very critical but helpful. Roger Gale's a very good example, extremely helpful with a lot of cases. Paul Butler, the Bishop of Durham, sorry to pick on you, Paul, but we worked together on the Syrian program. But everyone is really wanting this to work. So from a visa point of view, we have some blockages in the system. We have a question of unaccompanied minors, which we're working through with the cooperation of the government of Ukraine, and we're waiting to make progress on that. We've had problems with our PNC criminal record checks here, where people come up with an adverse hit. We have to start selecting through them, because someone who might have done something 20 years ago that's nothing whatsoever with their ability to house Ukrainian refugees, you know, it's just not a question of black or white, but we're working through these problems. So where have we got to? Well, we've settled as of today, just short of 55,000 Ukrainian refugees. I'm not boasting or bragging about this. I'm expecting far more, but it is, to put into perspective, the Syrian program, which I was put in charge of, was 20,000 over 4 years. Obviously 55,000 in well, I suppose it's best part of 2 months now, is of some significance. But the main thing is, and I know Will said to speak to 5 minutes, so I'm just going to park the system for the moment, other than to say, you know, now there's a lot to do with, we're working with local authorities, education, getting people into work. We've found that 60% of adult Ukrainians that have come here are already in work. People want work, but we have to help with language classes and childcare and things like that. We're working through all of that. So for the sake of time, I'll just park that for the moment. This is my vision. And I hope that what we've set up now for Ukrainian refugees, and I hope they want to, I hope the situation is that they want to return, and I hope the ambassador's dream of most people being able to and wanting to return back to help rebuild that country. I hope that comes true, not because we don't want people here, because these people are tremendous assets to our economy as well. But I quite understand, you know, these people want to go home, and everything we could when the time comes, we will help them to do so. But my vision is for this system to be permanent part of government, so that when refugee crises happen, and unfortunately they do all the time, we have a machinery. We've got more than 200,000 expressions of interest of people who want to take Ukrainians. Now, okay, when people think about it for 6 months, it probably will boil down to about, say, half of that. And that's not individuals, that's offers. So it could be 2 or 3 or 4 people. But we've got a lot of goodwill. We've got this machinery of government in place now. It's not perfect, but it's improving day by day. And I hope it will become a permanent part of how this country deals with refugees. Because when that doesn't happen, we find problems with the Afghan population who were brought out in emergency. And I think they did a brilliant job of flying people out under dire circumstances. But there are still several thousand people in hotels because it wasn't it was literally get them to safety, which of course I understand. You know, 3 out of my 4 grandparents fled Russia, actually one of them Ukraine, the other 3 Russia, the same principle, so the other 2 Russia, to get here. And of course, no one thought about anything then, it was just fleeing from adversity. But we need this machinery that we've set up, I hope will become a permanent part of government. And I hope we'll be able to deal with future crises, which of course I hope there won't be any, but history shows they will, to do that. So I've gone beyond my 5 minutes, Will, but I'll finish there. And of course, we'll be having questions.
Well, thank you, Richard, and thank you for everything you're doing. I know you've been working night and day to try and ensure that the scheme is a success, and it's fantastic to be able to hear your perspective. Can I now go to Lesia? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic.
Hi,
Do
Lesia.
you want to take it away, Lesia?
Yes. Hello, everyone. And I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but it's still very important to be part of this discussion. This discussion, which essentially is about the lives of so many Ukrainians that were forced to flee their country because of Russia's aggression. So I just want to make a few points based on what already the ambassador has said and what we have heard from Richard Harrington. So first and foremost, we have to understand that Ukraine is entirely different from Syria, Afghanistan, or anything else that has been happening in the world previously. And when we're talking about the Ukrainians who are seeking shelter, we're talking about people who are temporarily displaced. We have 8 million internally displaced persons, IDPs in Ukraine, and another 4 or so million outside of Ukraine. And we still prefer to call them externally displaced persons rather than refugees. Because exactly like His Excellency said, these Ukrainians, they are not looking to stay abroad. They are looking to come back. Already, we had over 1 million Ukrainians coming back, and even more want to come back. There's a strong attachment to Ukraine. And if you look at the portrait of the people who are leaving, usually we're talking about women who are leaving with children, leaving the men behind to fight, and women who, under any other circumstances, will pick up their bags, pack them up, and go back to Ukraine as soon as possible. But we are talking about mothers who want to see their children go up in a normal childhood, have a chance at an education and have a chance at a normal life. So it's really important for me that we actually use the proper names and that we differentiate between what is actually happening in Ukraine and the other previous situations that the UK helped so bravely and wholeheartedly to deal with. So I remember very well when I first came to the UK in 2022. It was actually on the third week of this escalation of Russian aggression. It was in March, and I had a very intense working meetings then with the Home Office, also with the Secretary of State for Housing and Communities, and also with Richard. I think it was your first or second day at the job, but already the dedication was there. In any case, back then, I was extremely impressed with the consolidated public and political will to help Ukrainians. And I'm still actually completely in awe at the numbers of the British people who have wholeheartedly opened up their doors to all the Ukrainian families. And this is exactly the kind of solidarity that the world needs to uproot the evil that comes from war, that comes from aggression, and that is coming from Russia at the moment. Since then, I think that almost 100,000 Ukrainians came to the UK, either on the Homes for Ukraine scheme or the family scheme. Both of these schemes were very sophisticated in design, and actually I was very much impressed at how they were supposed to work, at all the system, where there's the checks about the sponsors and all the things that were offered by the British government. But then when these schemes actually started working, the problems started coming in. And I'm sorry if I'm going to be a little bit sharp or a little bit blunt around some issues, but really it's about the frustration which has been brought to me by all the different Ukrainians who are still in the process of applying, and then also by the Ukrainians who are already in the UK and are experiencing issues with the way that these things work. The things that I'm going to say, they are not to criticize, no, God forbid that, because really, again, I think that Ukraine has a lot to be grateful for to the UK. But I hope that by bringing light to these issues, we can also start looking for solutions and start pushing for these solutions to become implemented more quickly. So first, there's the question of who can apply on these schemes. So I already gave you a kind of portrait, a kind of feel who is applying. But then we have whole different categories, which turns out are not able to come to safety to the UK. I'm talking about, for example, mothers who are by their job attached to Ukraine and cannot leave their jobs because they are either soldiers themselves in the Ukrainian army, or women who are in the medical sector, in the social care sector, in government jobs, in politics, members of parliament like me. They cannot leave the country, they cannot take their children to safety because they are doing very important work in the country. These women would normally be sending their kids away to safety with their parents, with the grandparents of the children, with other family members. This was the understanding. So actually I have quite a lot of applications like this from families who have applied back in March when the scheme was first opened, but still had no response whatsoever. And it just turns out that apparently the policy is such that children can only travel to the UK with their parents. And as I have recently found out that this is not the case for the whole of the UK, but presumably just for England, because in Wales and in Scotland, children can travel with grandparents, with aunts, uncles, and so on. But because this policy hasn't been clearly communicated, people were still applying and people are stuck with no response whatsoever from the government. So there's a twofold issue here. First of all, can we please clarify the policy? And second, could we do something about the communication? And the communication is a long-standing issue, actually, in all of the other aspects of how the scheme works. I will be coming back to that. So the second issue that I have been faced with is how long it actually takes to process the application. So Richard, I'm so happy to hear that the process has been streamlined. I really hope that this will be the case, because the worst thing that can happen is when you are being told that, oh, it's going to take just 3 days to process all applications, and essentially it is a visa application, like the ambassador said. It's not like some special program or anything. It's an application for a visa. But in any case, people back in March, when I was here, was in a meeting with Priti Patel at the Home Office. She was sitting across the table from me, and she was telling me, like, maximum 3 days. Maximum 3 days it will take for people to get a response, and they will be in safety in the UK, enjoying all the benefits that the UK Homes for Ukraine program is providing. But no, it's actually the average is 2 to 3 weeks. And that's not okay on many levels, because first of all, there's already the anxiety that you're waiting for your documents to be processed. Then there's the disappointment which grows every day that you're not getting a response or whatever, any communication whatsoever. And you can imagine how burdensome that is, on top of all the other psychological baggage that has been produced by living in a war zone, essentially. In many cases, during these 3 weeks, people have to live in temporary accommodations. Some people, during these 3 weeks of waiting, they remain in peril in the cities which are being under attack, like Kharkiv, and were barely able to get out in the end when their visas were approved. And some people never actually made it in the end to the UK because they got trapped in occupied cities like Kherson or like Mariupol. And that's a problem, as you can imagine. So again, I come back to the communication problem here. I got such a huge number of queries to help Ukrainians applying for the Homes for Ukraine scheme, particularly, just to help them understand at what stage their application is and whether it was processed at all. Actually, some people came back to me asking me whether it was whether it was a real program or whether it was just a scam about which they heard on the internet, because the only letter they got was that, yes, your documents have been accepted. Please hold on, bear with us. We're doing the best we can. And that's it, and no information beyond that. So I think there needs to be kind of regular updates sent out to the people who have applied as to where the documents, their documents are. And finally, even in the case now, I hope that the 48 hours will really be the number of the amount of time that it will take to process all the new applications. But if it's not, and you know that it's not, then it's better to give people a real time frame. Like if it's 2 weeks, it's 2 weeks. If it's 3 weeks, it's 3 weeks. At least, we know where we stand, and the people can make their decisions accordingly. There's nothing wrong with application processing and the checks system to be taking longer than 48 hours. It's okay, but as long as it's clearly stated to the people. A final issue is the sponsors checking scheme and how it works. First of all, the way that it's presented, I think it's great. I think it's great that the government does that effort to go into the houses to see where the Ukrainian families are being sent. But I have a lot of issues that have been raised with me last week by the Ukrainian volunteer groups here in London, that they have Ukrainians coming to them saying that essentially they are homeless because they have been kicked out by their hosts. And okay, it's a normal people-to-people situation. We are all human. Circumstances change, something went wrong in the relationship, but there must be some kind of a backup plan from the UK government. Where do these people go? The hosts are not obliged, they have no legal duty to keep the Ukrainian families. there's no responsibility if they don't or if they kick them out. But at the end of the day, we have Ukrainian families out in the streets. What happens to them? Having just 24-hour accommodations is not enough. Sometimes it's not enough to find another host family for them. Sometimes more time is needed to find a host family for these Ukrainian families in the same area where these families have already been living, because it's another ordeal, creating another ordeal for people who have been through wars, who have been through a very long journey, who have seemingly settled into the UK, got their children into schools in the UK, and then for them to be kicked out by the host and be told by the British government that, okay, now we're moving you across the country to another available host. So I think that this system needs to be a bit streamlined and worked through as well. And finally, it would be great if the teams from the British government in charge of well, refugee issues, although I don't really want to call Ukrainians refugees in this case, if you could work with the Ukrainian organizations and volunteer centers, which are based a bit all over the UK, who have set up hotlines for Ukrainians to call on, who have set up help centers in their volunteer centers for Ukrainians to come in. They can tell you a lot more about all the issues that Ukrainians encounter, and they can tell you exactly what they need to be providing the help. It's only natural that Ukrainians go to these Ukrainian hotlines and to the Ukrainian volunteer centers, because people there speak the language, people there have the same cultural background and have an understanding of the situation. So it would be great if you could find not only a way to coordinate with them, but also maybe for the British government to find support for these Ukrainian volunteer centers that have been already set up and created. And I think this would do a lot of good into streamlining the process and addressing the issues as soon as they are uncovered, rather than waiting for them to drag along. I think that is it from me. I'm actually very happy with the relationship we have with all the people around the table, because I think we work together well in coordination, and we have great working relationships. I hope it will continue like that. And I again would like to say thank you to the government of the UK, who is doing a lot, but can also do a little bit more. Thank you.
Through the scheme and is living in the UK with Victoria. And then I'm going to come back to Richard to respond to some of those
jumping
points.
up and down.
Indeed, but and I'm conscious of time, so we will get in questions from the audience as well. But Vika.
Hi everyone. I'm actually here to share my experience of living in the UK. And we all know about the issues that are happening with visas, applications, etc., etc. But I'm here to talk about what is actually happening with people when they got to the UK, and what is happening next, and how they're living, and what is actually happening with them afterwards. So before coming to the UK, I was living my perfect, active, interesting, beautiful life in Kyiv, the capital of Ukraine, and I had no plans to move somewhere, etc., etc. But I came to the UK under horrendous circumstances like that. But what I can say, that people, my friends and people locally, they support you very, very much. That helped me a lot to integrate at the beginning, and still helps me every day, on an everyday basis. They're supporting in different sort of things. So I'm actually living in the very rural area in Oxfordshire, where you can find actually Ukrainian person in every village. And it's really funny how the system works, that you come into a sponsor to an English person to host, and he's saying, oh, I know a Ukrainian girl who's living in that village, oh, in that village, and that village. And you're kind of really big family supporting each other. And you actually, even living in a rural area, you can still know a lot of Ukrainians in the local area. And what is very good as well is that there are, I don't know how many in Oxfordshire, but a lot of different organizations, volunteering organizations that are, they've been set up by Ukrainians who've been living here for 20, 30 years and English people. And they're helping a lot with providing, you know, free English classes, clothes, some help with filling application forms, because sometimes Ukrainian people come to the UK and they don't speak English, as my parents did, for example, last week. They don't really speak English. It's very good that I can help them, but still you have a lot of organizations locally that can help you to submit any sort of form or take clothes from somewhere, and even there are some free food, free clothes, etc., etc. So it's very helpful. But anyway, it's really weird. How do you actually find the local organization? Because you're not coming to the house and that there is no announcement, here is the local organization or something like that. You just come and you just hear from people. It's really, really cool that system works like that in locally, inside with people, because you know everything about the area just coming to the village, whatever. And it's very cool that they're trying to bring you to life again. So we have in a lot of different events in a village hall, etc. And personally, I with another Ukrainians and with my English friends, we are doing a lot of donation work. We're collecting donations. We're doing Ukrainian suppers for English people. They're coming, eating our food. We're talking about traditions, etc. So we are organizing different things to collect donations, everything, and people are helping so much. We also, with my English friend, we also set up accidentally a kind of a database of English people who want to host Ukrainians, and we are matching them together, and we're trying to help them to come to submit the application form, to help to integrate as well, and providing all the information about all local authorities, local volunteering organization, and etc., etc. And I can say that every Ukrainian who comes here doing the same, not in this sort of thing, but they are doing as much as they can with English people to help each other to integrate, and etc., etc. So it's absolutely valuable that what the scheme can give to Ukrainian people, because they can use all the facilities that you guys using. Of course, there are some problems when you come and with all the documents that you need to submit, receive all the national insurance numbers, etc., looking for a job. Some people don't know English. It's also quite challenging for them. But going through this process, you kind of settling down, and what I can say that English society really accept Ukrainians and as their native, so they're trying to show the love and respect, and it's very valuable. And I can say for me, this scheme is like, you know, I luckily got into that. I know that some people are struggling and have some challenges. For me, it turned up a very positive experience, and I'm happy to be here and to help from the UK, and trying to help Ukraine from the UK. And I know that I'm doing more here than I can do there, sitting in the occupation down in Kherson, where I'm originally from. So as about the hopes and beliefs and plans about Ukraine, I know and I believe that Ukraine will be rebuilt really quickly, because all Ukrainians, I know all of my friends, the young generation, we are keen on coming back, and we are keen on living in our own country. And I know that it'll happen really soon. And I know the challenges makes us stronger and better, and we're going to become great, even greater country than we were before. I know it, and everyone knows it, especially among Ukrainians. So, but I'm happy to have the UK like my second home, and I know that my friends will accept me whatever they want. That's very positive. So, and yeah, I want to say thank you for everything, the government soon, the Home Office, and the people support. And I want to say that every Ukrainian who comes here, even coming through challenges with receiving visa, will feel like at home, I hope, because the sponsors are supporting on the everyday basis, and the people and everyone. So thank you so much for your attention.
Vika, thank you so much. It's so valuable and inspirational hearing from you about your experiences. Richard, I'm going to ask you to, within 2 minutes.
I know.
Respond to some very complex questions.
And, well, all I will say is that with Lesia has been so helpful to me. We've been through these issues herself, and she knows I'm trying to work through it. But some of them are quite sensitive. The point she made about children, well, safeguarding is also important, and we're working with the ambassador and his people as well, because we can only do things in cooperation with the Ukrainian government. It's taken longer than I wanted, but I'm hopeful of a solution that the Ukrainians and ourselves and everyone can work together. The communication side, it's under the old system, in order to communicate back with people, it took as much time as processing the visa. And that's not a good thing, but it is based on a system that could not do that. With our new system, then the communication is much easier. Go into great detail, I don't really want me to do so. We've dealt with this time of the process application, but just quickly on the sponsor scheme and homelessness, the point that Lesia mentioned. There are some reports of homelessness that's come from where these sponsorships not worked because people have changed their mind or whatever. And we are in the process of, though being dealt with by local authorities, putting people into new sponsors, but we're now working with third-party organisations. We're helping fund them to it's called rematching, to make sure that they rematch, and I hope we can work through that. But finally, of my 2 minutes, the voluntary, the Ukrainian organisations that Lesia mentioned, we do work with them very closely. In fact, I had a weekly call with Petra and others, Lesia, yesterday, and now we're expanding it to all of the Ukrainian organisations in the UK. So point well made, but it's being done. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, we may get into some of those things again with questions. Having a minister on a panel always invites people to ask about things other than the subject at hand. So I'm going to ask questions to be on Ukraine and Homes for Ukraine, if that's possible. And we only have around 10 minutes or so. So do say who your question is to, and I will try and direct as possible. We have at the front, and I'm going to go to Natasha at the back, and there's one here on the second row. So, and I'll do 3 at a time. So just here at the front, so Jack here. Sorry, Jack.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you, David Barrett from the Daily Mail. This is principally for the ambassador, please. Your Excellency, you mentioned your ambition for visa-free travel. Is that something you want to see straight away while displaced persons are still trying to get to the UK so that it's easier for them to reach here? Or are you talking about longer term as hopefully Ukraine gets the opportunity to recover and rebuild your economy, or both? And on the same point to the Minister, it sounds like you and the Prime Minister are not keen to change the way the visa system works at the moment, but given what the Ambassador has said, can you foresee a point where the UK introduces visa-free travel for Ukrainians, given the ever-growing bond between our two countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, thanks for having us. Minister, could you just talk about the reasons from your perspective why some of the Homes for Ukraine sort of pairings aren't matching out? And do we have any numbers on how many of those people there are at all? Also, you sort of hinted that, you're sort of, it's sad to see so many other refugees in hotels. Would you like to see the Homes for Ukraine sort of system opened up to generally homes for other refugees? Should they be opening their homes to others too? And also on the average time, which has been mentioned for the processes, do we have an up-to-date average time on how long each visa process is taking at the moment? Thanks so much. Sorry.
Hi there, John Johnston from Politics Home. A question for Lord Harrington. There's still dozens of applications from the early days of the scheme, some of them waiting 58, 60 days to get their visas through. Some of those who've been waiting that long have cancelled those applications and reapplied and had them within days. I know you said there wasn't data loss at that time, but there clearly seems to be an issue with some of those early applications. Is that something that's being looked at?
Thank you. I believe that the question already holds the answer. Yes, I would like our nations to have closer bonds. I would like visas to be lifted at all. When I was Minister of Foreign Affairs, I myself had to push for one more year and then another year just to allow our British colleagues, to open up the negotiations. Let's be frank. So it's still there at the same point. I know that there is wrong time to raise it, and would like rather focus on what we're having right now and how the particular system can be helped. So I believe at this moment, what we can do is just to allow Ukrainians, as it happens in all European nations or nations of the European Union, to come here and then to deal with them, because sometimes they have to leave cities under the bombardment. So there is no time for waiting for 60, 80 days for the two just to have confirmation that your visa been processed. And frankly speaking, there is no status update on the website where you can actually check whether your visa is considered at all. It's very kind sort of notice that we receive your documents, and that's the last thing you are receiving. This is probably, I would rather see, the bar, like green bar, you now at almost 99%, but it's not. And people are complaining, talking to us that they don't understand what is happening. Will they ever receive it, or they right to pack and going somewhere to France or Albania?
Fantastic, thank you.
I think the rest
Richard, they were unfortunately.
Yes, I'm glad I'll go through, as Jack from the Daily Mail question asked about, the visa system that you've said. I mean, we've covered it really. For me, I was given a policy that was a visa system, and I've made it my best efforts and endeavours to make sure it's done as quickly as possible. The broader issues of whether people should travel from anywhere they want in the world without visas. I mean, to me, I hope technology will just take care of that issue, and visas themselves are something from a different era to me, but that's a whole different issue. But I think it's quite reasonable and if sponsorship doesn't work, basically, is it a lot of cases or is it not? Well, it's very few cases up to now. I don't have a number for you, but it is really very few cases. But I would expect in the normal course of things, in numerical terms, obviously, the more people we settle, there'll be people who genuinely change their mind. Perhaps they can't cope when people come. And it's for us to set up a quick and easy system, given we've got plenty of other people who are applying to do that. And John Johnson, which was basically, we've discussed this ourselves personally, and I think you know the answer. I mean, yes, there are people from the beginning. There are people that waited too long. All I can say is now, the ones that are still in the system from then are usually where it's very complex cases and we're having to change policy to take them. And we're working through that system. I know, John, you might think that's not an acceptable answer, but I didn't want to give you some waffle. The ones that are left are blocked for a purpose. And I'm hoping those purposes will disappear quite quickly. Again, something we're working with the ambassador and his government on.
Fantastic. Thank you. I wish we could carry on, and I'm sorry to those I didn't take in the first round of questions, but we are out of time, and I'm very conscious that both the ambassador and the minister have lots and lots of other things to be getting on with, which are of the paramount importance, as we have heard today. So can I just say to close, it is clear that there is enormous goodwill towards the UK and the generosity of the British people in taking people displaced in Ukraine. And it's been fantastic to hear some of those experiences direct, both from Kyiv and also from people here in the UK. But it's also clear there are issues that need to be dealt with. And Minister, you've been very frank and honest, and I'm really grateful for you for kind of fronting up where things aren't going as well and identifying issues that still need to be resolved. But it's also clear there is just a huge amount of public and political will in order to deliver that, as Lesia said. So thank you all very much. I'm very excited about Homes for Ukraine and the possibility of it forming the basis for future policy as well, as you said, Richard. And it's clear that there are lots and lots of lessons that we can take. So thank you all for being here. Thank you in particular to our panel, both here in the UK and in Kyiv, for joining us. And if you could all just join me in closing by giving a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you.
I'm sorry I've got to go now, but I'm available usually for questions, I hope. I'm very pleased to talk about it